I'm Louis, I'll be your host for today. Before we deep dive into this crucial subject, I'm going to start with a few logistic notes. This webinar is going to last for about an hour. There's a Q&A section. Please use it if you have any question, and do mention the names of the speaker you want to address the question to, and they might respond directly or during the Q&A section at the end of this webinar. And that's all for me. So I'm going to pass the floor to Uloma for the introduction.
Thank you, Louis. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Uloma Ogba, the lead gender specialist for UNCDF's Migration and Remittances program, and I'll be moderating today's session on Innovating for Impact, Catalyzing Gender-Smart Digital Remittances. As part of, next slide. Thank you. As part of UNCDF's Gender Collaborative for Remittances series, this webinar will explore different and complementary approaches to catalyzing innovation in gender-smart remittances. Now, the concept of innovating to catalyze is a strategic approach to unlocking the developmental and economic potential of remittances. It is about informing and incentivizing market-based improvements in a way that makes the next era of gender-smart remittance products and services self-sustaining. It is about crowding in interest from the private sector to design and make available gender transformative remittance options, while ensuring that the regulatory environment enables rather than stifles development. And above all, it is about ensuring that we leave no one behind in the digital era. Now, given the scope and scale of global remittances today, and the significant role that women, both on the sending and receiving side, play within that, it is becoming increasingly important that we root innovation in gender disaggregated data and customer-centric experience. And so today we'll hear from our three speakers who will explore how human-centered design and customer-centric evidence act as a strong foundation for how remittance service providers can embed gender sensitivity in their products and services. And this is a clear example of how applied research can catalyze remittance markets. Furthering the potential of human-centered design, financial incentivization strategies can support remittance service providers in transforming their business models and offerings to be more gender responsive. Impact-linked finance is a particularly well-suited mechanism in this regard, as it directly rewards market-based innovation in achieving gender-based outcomes. For remittance service providers, this type of finance has the benefit of predictable financial rewards in return for achieving certain gender-based objectives. And for investors and donors, contributions are directly associated with measurable impact. For each of these approaches to become more sustainable, an enabling and supportive ecosystem of actors testing, refining, and accelerating gender-based digital financial solutions is a strong contextual component. And so today we will also explore the catalytic potential of partnership, collaboration, and a collective commitment to gender-based solutions, ultimately demonstrating the viability of gender-smart remittances as a pathway to driving women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment. Next slide, please. So UNCDF launched the Gender Colab in late 2022 as a platform for engagement between key decision makers and practitioners in the remittance sector. The Colab facilitates sharing of insights from gender mainstreaming efforts and discusses emerging trends in evidence-based and gender-smart remittance policymaking and innovation. The Gender Colab cuts across policy, innovation, and research, with collaborations between research partners, industry leaders, and field practitioners. And this platform enhances the impact of research while bridging the gap between insights and action, promoting scalable sector-wide impact on financial inclusion and resilience for migrants and their families. And the Gender Colab is open to all who are interested in contributing to its mission and goals. And indeed, many of you on the call today have participated in previous Colab sessions. And so with that brief intro of today's session, it is my pleasure to introduce to you today our three speakers. First we have Julie Kamal, a gender and research analyst on UNCDF's Migration and Remittances team. Julie's work is all about mainstreaming a gender lens across all national, regional, and global activities. Julie previously worked at the Dutch Development Bank, studying the role of development finance and fintech on women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment. And she holds a master's in economics and governance from Leiden University in the Netherlands. Welcome, Julie. And our second speaker today will be Natasha Dinham. Natasha is the lead of advisory and advocacy at Roots of Impact, where she manages the Impact-Linked Fund for Gender Inclusive FinTech. Now, before joining Roots of Impact, Natasha led the Innovative Finance Initiative at the Bertha Center for Social Innovation. She has extensive experience in managing the technical assistance portfolios of financial institutions in Africa, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia through FMO, the Dutch Development Bank. Natasha served on the advisory and investment committees of many impact funds and is passionate about financial inclusion, holding a certificate in rethinking financial inclusion, as well as migrant remittances and financial services from the Harvard Kennedy School. Welcome, Natasha. And our third speaker today is Luyana Temba. Luyana is an associate in the advisory and partnerships team at iGravity, where she leads the ecosystem initiatives of the Impact-Linked Fund for Gender Inclusive FinTech. With a focus on financial inclusion for women affected by migration, Luyana collaborates with stakeholders to test, refine, and accelerate financial products and services. She also provides expertise in impact measurement and management, supporting iGravity's consultancy mandates in designing innovative financing mechanisms for the SDGs. With a diverse background working with UNESCO, NGOs, crowdfunders, and impact investors, Luyana has robust experience implementing gender and economic empowerment programs in Eastern Africa. She also specializes in conducting impact-first screenings of social enterprises through an intersectional lens, considering factors such as gender, ethnicity, immigration status, and geography that contribute to exclusion. Welcome, Luyana. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Julie, our first speaker. Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Iloma, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar, and today I'm going to share with you UNCDF's approach to mainstreaming gender in remittance innovations and how we work with the private sector partners to address the challenges in reaching women remittance customers. Now let's delve into the details of our approach. On to the next slide. So UNCDF's gender mainstreaming strategy is based on 3 key pillars: to empower, to mainstream gender, and to collaborate. First, we empower the private and public sector with demand and supply side data to make informed choices. Secondly, we understand that gender mainstreaming is not about adding a woman's component. Rather, it is about crowding in the diverse experiences of women and men and reflecting them in the remittance process. By examining the factors that shape the differences in remittance behavior, we can then apply these insights to supporting enabling policies, open digital ecosystems, inclusive innovation, and customer empowerment. Finally, we collaborate with the external partners to advocate and share knowledge about migrant-centered and gender-smart approaches to digital remittances. Acknowledging that women constitute half of the world's 281 million migrants and 60% of the remittance recipients in developing countries, our challenge therefore lies in finding ways to ensure more inclusive and accessible financial solutions for remittance customers, especially women. Let's move to the next slide. In 2021, we published a working paper representing our first attempt at distilling our approach into a set of principles for remittance service providers. Our primary focus is on adopting a migrant-centric and gender-smart approach to designing and implementing digital remittances. I'm sorry, I'm just going to put my mic a little bit closer. And this approach is built on the 5 principles, which are interwoven into our TA process, including the tools, workshops, and advisory support that we provide to our partners. But what does this mean in practical terms? Adopting a migrant-centric and gender-smart approach is a business strategy that places the needs and preferences of women and men remittance customers at the forefront. This could promote remittance customers' financial inclusion, their financial health, and gender equality, alongside some key benefits for the private sector, including a better product market fit, expansion of their customer base, and more cross-selling opportunities for additional services. Now, let's move forward and explore how this approach has unfolded in practice. So over the past 2 years, UNCDF has partnered with remittance service providers on remittance innovation pilots through the demand-side research in order to help them understand their customers. And to gain a holistic view of the remittance landscape, we harmonized data from 10 remittance service providers, allowing us to analyze approximately 80 million transaction records for 8 million customers. In addition to data analysis, we conducted around 3,000 surveys and 100 in-depth customer interviews in order to understand the needs and pain points of remittance customers. And to make this research more actionable, we validated our insights with the private sector partners and other relevant stakeholders. And then we translated these insights into article series in order to empower the private and public sector to make informed decisions that could in turn drive gender inclusive innovations. Now, let me explain how we implemented the demand side research onto the next slide. So to ensure the success of our demand side research, we partnered with Kit Tropical Institute, Butterfly Works, and Aflatoon. And this collaboration proved to be invaluable at different stages of our research. In action, we leveraged data from active customers of our remittance service partners across different regions of the world. About 3/4 of the customers are remittance recipients, and they are served by Brak Bank in Bangladesh, IME Pay in Nepal, Wizall Money in Senegal, and Lion Bank in Ethiopia. The remaining quarter are remittance senders, and they are customers of Brak Bank and Edenred in the UAE and Centpay in South Korea. Additionally, we conducted interviews with foreign domestic workers in Singapore. In our sampling, we made sure to maintain a 50-50% gender balance in order to capture the unique experiences of the women and men remittance customers. Now, let's move forward and explore the specific insights derived from this research and how they're shaping the future of remittances. So to understand the use cases of remittance, we asked survey respondents what they spend their remittances on. And not surprisingly, irrespective of the country, consumption emerged as the main use of remittances, with approximately 80% of the respondents allocating remittances for household-related expenses. But beyond consumption, we also identified other important use cases of remittances, including spending on education, healthcare, investments, utility and energy bill payments. However, we noticed that women are more likely to allocate their remittances towards education, healthcare, and utility bill payments, while men tend to utilize remittances for productive or financial investments. Really, the wide use cases of remittances indicate that they can contribute to several SDGs. But for remittances to greatly impact SDG 5 on gender equality, we would require a gendered approach to financial service delivery. Next, we asked the respondents, onto the next slide. Yes, thank you. Yes, this one, thanks. We asked the respondents what type of resilience building financial services that they had used in the last 12 months. And by resilience, we refer to one's ability to manage unexpected events such as income or job loss, sudden health emergencies, and unforeseen losses. And in our analysis, these responses varied. Approximately 50 to 60% of the remittance customers utilized savings accounts, and this is followed by the use of insurance and loans, thus showing the remittance customers' preference for safeguarding their funds, but also meeting their long-term objectives. Besides that, we observed that women have less access to saving accounts, mobile wallets for digital payments, and insurance. Moreover, the use of resilience-building financial services among the remittance customers that we surveyed in Ethiopia, Senegal, Nepal, and Bangladesh exceeded the national averages in the respective developing countries. And this underscores the transformative potential of remittances in promoting financial inclusion. So far, we've established two key messages. Number one, that remittances have different use cases, but they are mostly consumption-centric. Secondly, remittance customers also use resilience-building financial services. Now, the next step is to check whether these arguments hold for all customers. And within the remittance customer group, we identified two segments based on the remittance platform that they use. So we have digital customers who use digital platforms such as bank accounts and mobile wallets. And then we have cash customers, and they send or receive remittances in cash form. And we checked whether these differences between these two groups, and we saw that there is a distinct, that digital customers have a distinct advantage over cash customers when it comes to accessing and utilizing these financial services. Generally, digital customers have higher usage rates of saving accounts, mobile wallets for domestic payments, and current accounts compared to cash customers. Moving forward, we examined whether the mode of sending or receiving remittances. Onto the next slide, please. Yes, here we tried to understand whether the mode of sending or receiving remittances affects the customer's financial health. And we analyzed the respondents' capacity to handle a 30-day financial emergency. And we found that 82% of the digital customers have better financial resilience compared to 75% of the cash customers. Financial health encompasses more than just financial resilience. It also includes components such as financial control, financial security, and financial freedom. And by combining these components, we were able to obtain a more comprehensive measure of financial health. Our findings show that digital customers have better overall financial health than cash customers. For example, in terms of financial security, recipients using digital channels had money left over at the end of the month compared to recipients using cash channels. And on financial control, we saw that women who used digital remittances reported more control over how money was used compared to those who used cash channels. On to the next slide. But the question really is, are digital remittances accessible to everyone? So to do so, we triangulated qualitative and quantitative insights, and using customer archetypes, we can clearly understand the needs and behaviors of the remittance customers. So on this slide, you see examples of customer archetypes developed from IME Pay customers. On the left-hand side, you see Usha, who represents the cash customer. And on the right, on the other side, you see Rabin, who represents the mobile wallet customer. I know it's a little bit small, but we ideally try to put in the sentiments of these customers. And we see generally that just like Usha, most women recipients in Nepal often receive remittances in cash form and use them for children's education and repaying their husband's migration loan, while men utilize remittances for business investments. And these trends could be explained by social norms, differences in family structures, and support systems. Now, in summary, which is my final slide, digitizing remittances has the potential to make them faster, cheaper, and safer, and could serve as an on-ramp to other financial services linked to resilience. Yet, our research shows that women are being left behind, as only 3 out of 10 digital remittance users are women. To address this, UNCDF has adopted a gender-smart and migrant-centered approach that identifies, prioritizes, and includes the voice, choice, skills, and control of women in the design and the delivery of digital remittance services in order to advance their financial inclusion and financial health. And through our work with the private sector, we are seeing evidence that, number one, digitizing does indeed open up new opportunities to enhance the delivery of remittances and thus transforming women's engagement with financial services. Secondly, women customers tend to be loyal to companies that understand and represent their needs. And finally, the most successful digital remittance products are the ones that meet women where they are, considering factors like their resource and mobility constraints and their digital and financial literacy needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I think what stood out to me from your presentation is really that the research component and how that is driving a lot of the work that UNCDF is doing in the area of promoting or incentivizing more gender smart innovations in remittances. And I think some of the numbers that really stood out to me were the fact that UNCDF has collected and analyzed 80 million transaction records for over 8 million customers, and also those 3,000 surveys. And I think it was really interesting to also see in the end how you put those profiles together and how those were informed by both the quantitative and qualitative research. And really that UNCDF strategy, at least in my view, is really driven by the evidence coming from the data. And I think you've touched briefly upon sort of the innovations that have come out of that, but I think it'll be interesting for us to learn a bit more about that when we get to the Q&A, so that we can understand a bit more about how those insights from the data are really translating into tangible innovations in practice. So with that, we'll now turn the floor over to Natasha from Roots of Impact. Natasha, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Uloma, and thank you to the UNCDF team for having us today. We're really delighted to share a little bit about the Impact Linked Fund for Gender Inclusive Fintech, and how we're using innovation to create more impact, and particularly how this is relevant for digital remittances. Now, the Impact Linked Fund for Gender Inclusive Fintech is a program that is made up of multiple elements, and I'm also joined today by my colleague Liana from iGravity, who'll be sharing some more concrete insights from some of our work to date a little bit later on. But before we get on to that, let's start off with what impact-linked finance actually is. So as you can see on this slide, currently, when enterprises create social value in any sector, this impact is generally not rewarded in any way. So for example, when a fintech provides quality services to women that substantially improves their lives, that is positive for society, but the company itself doesn't benefit or get compensated for the value that they're creating. So impact-linked finance aims to address this by pricing and rewarding positive impact. This means that enterprises who create value benefit from better financial terms for better impact, or the more social value they create, the higher the rewards that are offered to them. We can go to the next slide, please. So the Impact Linked Fund for Gender Inclusive Fintech, or the ILF for GIF as we affectionately call it, focuses specifically on gender transformative outcomes for financial inclusion. It takes a very holistic approach to achieving this, combining technical assistance, ecosystem building, and a research agenda to ensure that we build and we learn as we implement. Now, I should mention that the ILF for GIF is not exclusively focused on digital remittances and migration, but this is a key area of focus for us. And we'll talk a little more later about how we're addressing this through concrete elements of the fund. We can go to the next slide, please. So how does the ILF for GIF work in practice? I mentioned that the fund has a number of different elements, including technical assistance and research, but the two main elements of the fund are shown on the slide. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see our work with organizations that we call ecosystem enablers and some of the excellent partners we're working with here. And my colleague Liana is going to dive into this work stream in more detail shortly. At the top of the slide, you'll see our impact-linked finance transactions conducted in partnership with fintechs and investment fund partners. So these fund partners include Women's World Banking Asset Management, Bamboo Capital Partners, Axion Venture Labs, Patamar Capital, and Nordic impact funds. The fund managers provide the investment to fintechs, and then we provide financial incentives that are tied to the achievement of gender outcomes. Now, the financial incentives can be structured in two ways. Either they can be provided as direct payments to the fintech, or they can be embedded into the investment terms themselves. In both cases, the financial incentives are only provided once the gender outcomes have been achieved and independently verified. So there's also clear value for money for the funders that are providing the incentives. We can go to the next slide. So the idea of providing financial incentives to fintechs has two main effects. Firstly, and primarily, the financial rewards encourage the fintech to orient or reorient their products and services specifically to meet the needs of women. However, the financial incentives also improve their commercial viability by acting as an additional revenue stream. Now, you'll see in the graphic on the left that we've noted the baseline gender impact increasing even without financial incentives, and that comes from some of the things that Julie mentioned around how the impact on women of, for example, remittances in terms of effects on healthcare or education or financial resilience. So we're taking into account that there may be an increase in baseline gender impact even without incentives. And then what we do is we highlight the additional impact that is created through impact-linked finance in orange. Of course, every fintech is different, every baseline is different, but the additionality is really key for us. So as much as possible, we map out what would have happened without the incentives and then count the additional impact as a result of the transaction. We can go to the next slide. In terms of key facts about the fund, we have a large geographic focus covering sub-Saharan Africa, MENA, and Asia. The target transaction size, and that's the amount of investment that's provided by our fund manager partners, is between around 500,000 to $5 million US. And then on top of this investment, we provide the financial incentives of between 200,000 and $1 million. The types of enterprises that we work with are early to growth stage fintechs, meeting at least one of the 2X criteria, and that's purely to demonstrate a commitment to gender by the fintech already. We'd like to see them have high impact potential and especially additional impact potential, and they should be willing and able to measure their impact. And of course, we have a preference for fintechs that are serving vulnerable women, particularly migrants, through remittances. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned that we incentivize gender transformative outcomes, but what exactly are these outcomes? So before we dive into the specifics on the slide, I should mention that each transaction is individual and benefits from a bottom-up incentive structure that is designed in partnership with the fintech. We recognize that every context and starting point is different, and so we conduct a collaborative, in-depth process with each fintech to select metrics that work best for their business model and are likely to result in the highest additionality. So this slide shows a snapshot of some of the potential metrics we could select across the fintech value chain. In practice, we select 2 to 3 of these per fintech and then structure the incentives annually for a period of about 3 years. Keep in mind that these metrics are relevant for all fintechs, not only those focusing on remittances, so some will be more relevant to this discussion than others. So first, in the blue circle, livelihood improvement for end clients are key. Too often, the term gender just considers the organizational level, and we want to ensure that the fintechs are embedding gender considerations into the core of their business models as well. This means that they're not only reaching more women, but also understanding the effect that their products and services are having on these women's lives. As you'll see on the slide, this could include things like cost savings, for example, reducing the cost of sending money home, improved economic activity in cases where remittances encourage economic activity, stronger financial literacy in health, and quality and value for female clients. In the orange circle, we want to incentivize the hardest to reach, most vulnerable women and migrants. Here, we're looking at things like first-time access to financial products that otherwise wouldn't be available, and improved or more affordable services or remittances for vulnerable women. And finally, research has shown that supporting gender equity at the ownership, board, and staff level also translates to improved focus on women as end clients. So this is also an area of focus for us. As much as possible, we like to focus on improvements to quality of life and career satisfaction and progression, rather than just counting the number of women in these positions. So now that you've had a chance to see how we use financial incentives to encourage more focus on gender for fintechs and remittance providers, I'll hand over to my colleague Luana to share some of the other elements of our ecosystem enabler work and how this comes to work in practice.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Natasha and UNCDF for having us. So, as Natasha explained, the ILF for GIF focuses on improving gender outcomes, and the ecosystem approach that I'll take us through now was designed to specifically improve financial outcomes for women impacted by migration. Of course, recognizing that women that migrate can face even greater challenges than men. And so our ecosystem approach under the ILF for GIF was designed to tackle some key barriers that financial service providers face when attempting to improve the financial health of migrant women. A few are mentioned here on the slide, but of course this list is non-exhaustive. But just to bring us some context, I'd like to just mention a few. So, firstly, we see that FSPs have sometimes limited specialized expertise and support on how exactly to develop and market digital solutions for this specific market. And, as any other market segment, migrant women have distinct financial needs, and that is also throughout their migration journey. And traditional financial solutions can fall short in catering to these unique circumstances. Another one is that financial service providers often lack incentives to focus on migrant women and also other marginalized groups. And as a distinct customer segment, this is due to various reasons. Some of them can include, for example, the perceived let's say, higher risk or misconceptions about the profitability of this customer segment. Another one could be, of course, the short-term nature of some migrant stay in their destination countries, which might lead providers to believe that there is insufficient long-term potential for customer retention and revenue. Another key barrier that's been identified is the limited orientation towards data and impact measurement and management. It's recognized now that data plays a vital role in understanding the unique financial behaviors and preferences and needs of any customer segment. So for migrant and migrant women more specifically, it provides important insights into their remittance patterns, savings behavior, and spending habits, which of course are essential for designing effective solutions. But with limited, let's say, know-how, often resources, and sometimes outdated data infrastructures, providers may struggle to prioritize impact measurement and management and impact data collection. And finally, another key barrier that we're working at addressing is the limited evidence on which digital solution has or have the greatest effect on migrant women's financial health. As this kind of landscape of financial technology is evolving, we see various digital solutions emerge, each addressing specific challenges for different customer segments. But in reality, when it comes to people and women that migrate, we still see a lack of research and evidence to identify which solutions truly make a positive change. So it's to address some of these challenges that I mentioned, and again, there's more that I can cover, that the ILF for GIF has partnered with ecosystem actors, and that is to incubate, test, refine, and accelerate digital solutions that are specifically designed for this target market. So at the moment, the ILF for GIF has 3 formalized partnerships We have one with Village Capital and another one with SeedStars. With these two partners, we have launched 2 accelerator programs to support in total over 60 early to growth stage fintechs. And that is in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. All of them have in common that they offer financial solutions to migrants or have the potential to tap into that market. And these accelerator programs focus both on investability and capacity of these fintechs to raise funding, but also on improving their market fit for migrant women and develop robust IMM frameworks. But today I'd like to focus on the third partnership that we have with the Women's World Banking. As you know, this session is focused on remittances and the program with Women's World Banking as well. I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, over a year ago, we've entered a 4+ years partnerships with the Women's World Banking. For those who don't know, Women's World Banking is a global non-profit organization that has been working since the late 70s, to accelerate financial inclusion for underserved or unbanked women. So we've partnered with them to incubate digital remittances that are tailor-made for migrant women, and in collaboration with 3 financial service providers in Sub-Saharan and in Africa. Currently, the program has been initiated with 2 of these financial service providers, being Access Bank in Nigeria and Wing Bank in Cambodia. So our approach, as on the slide, integrates both digital and financial capability, and this is to ensure that women clients can utilize these financial services effectively. And to measure the impact of digitized remittances on women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment, Women's World Banking will also conduct, along the incubation, an outcomes research, and this is to provide concrete evidence to the ecosystem, and this addresses kind of the challenge that I mentioned earlier, the lack of evidence on which solutions have the greatest effect. And so through this partnership and research-driven approach, we aim to break down some barriers and create sustainable solutions that meet the needs of remittance senders, as well as the recipients of these remittances. And Women's World Banking has very kindly trusted me to share some insights on this program, their methodology, and how they're applying women-centered design to conduct this program. And I'd like to thank them for. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So as I was mentioning, Women's World Banking, their approach recognizes that effective solutions must serve the customer's need while ensuring business success. And through research and deep understanding of the target audience, they design financial products that resonate for women, and in this case, migrant women, to address their unique financial needs. And by placing women at the core of the design process, they ensure that these solutions are relevant and accessible and user-friendly. But Women's World Banking goes beyond this aspect. They also focus on creating commercially viable solutions, right? This is key for sustainability. But so by aligning the design with the business strategy, they ensure that these solutions are financially sustainable and also generate revenue for the provider. So this dual focus on women's need, business viability, creates, let's say, a win-win situation where the user has increased access to financial services, and at the same time, financial service providers benefit from tapping into a new market segment. So I'd like to take you through how this is being done in practice, by maybe showing you how this is done with the collaboration with Access Bank in Nigeria. And also please note that this program is currently in progress, so I won't be able to elaborate on results, but I'd like to share how innovation is integrated into this design process. So first, as you can see here, we have the steps that we call define and diagnose. So obviously, after formalizing the partnership with the provider, Access Bank, Women's World Banking first works at gaining insights into the financial needs and behaviors of the target market, obviously through market research. In this case, it involved some direct interviews with migrant women that are at different stages of their migration. Some of them are bank users, some are not. They also talk to recipients of remittances and other ecosystem actors working in this space. So the goal here is to understand users' experiences when sending and receiving remittances, and simultaneously they conduct a comprehensive analysis of Access Bank, the partner, looking at their structure, their processes, strengths, and so on. And this dual approach, again, ensures they identify opportunities to create value for both the market segment and the provider. And then we go through design and testing. So Women's World Banking uses the insights from the previous steps that I just mentioned to design the various components of the digital remittance product. So the components designed also includes strategies for, of course, awareness, adoption, a marketing plan, and the usual product designs kind of steps. And from here, a full prototype is produced and an initial user testing is done. And this is key to collect feedback to assess the prototype's usability, feasibility, and just allowing the bank and Women's World Banking to make the necessary refinements before going into the last step, which is product scaling. So here the product is rolled out, so launched at scale, and to assess, its ability, the ability of the product to meet the needs of the target market and the overall impact of the product. Women's World Banking conducts different data collections, baseline, midline, and line, to measure the effect of the solution on so the remittance sender, the migrant women, their families. So here, mostly looking at how the product affects financial inclusion and economic empowerment, and then also collecting data on the bank side. So looking at customer engagement and retention, among other things. And again, this is of course key to validate or invalidate the, let's say, the initial theory of change, and ensure that we can assess what works and what doesn't, and be able to bring further evidence to the sector and this ecosystem. And maybe just to conclude, I would like to just mention a few key, I think, takeaways that we have so far from this approach, which again is ongoing. I think the first one is that the product will be scaled, like I mentioned, through the rollout, but it will also be scaled through replications. So we can replicate what works effectively on a larger scale with other providers, and expanding that financial service to other migration corridors and other regions. Another element I'd like to point is that here the innovation is not just reliant on the technology, but really it's integrated throughout the design and testing process, where Women's World Banking provides the technical and gender-focused expertise. The bank on the other side contributes their infrastructure, their know-how, and so we're leveraging strengths from both sides. And maybe just to conclude, one last element I'd like to mention is that through these collaborations, we're seeing that traditional financial service providers, such as larger banks like Access Bank, are eager to and enthusiastic to collaborate and embrace these social innovations, and that with the right support and incentives, we see openness to exploring new avenues to improve financial inclusion. And this collaborative spirit between the financial service provider and a global nonprofit like the Women's World Banking can lead to avenues for positive change in this financial landscape. I will pause here.
Thank you, Luyan. Thank you, Natasha, for this presentation on the impact-linked finance funds approach. I think as listening to your presentation, I can see the overlap or similarities with the ESG, environmental, social and governance approach, and really how that focus on rewarding positive outcomes, in this case, gender outcomes, is what is driving, more sustainable and responsible investing on the part of the donors, but also this long-term performance on the part of the private sector and the rest of the partners that you'd want to see take up this approach to really prioritizing the needs of women during the innovation design process. So I think with that, we will move to the Q&A portion of today's session. I see that there are already some questions that were in the chat that are being answered by the speakers. So I encourage you to post your questions in the chat, and we'll ensure to answer those. The speakers will ensure to answer those as they can. But in the meantime, we do have a couple of questions, 2 questions that we'd like to direct to all of the speakers. So the presentations today spoke about, there's a lot of talk about data and using that to drive decision-making and how that feeds into human-centered design. We talked about financial incentivization, the ecosystem approach, and having this collaboration and partnerships as strong levers and entry points for incentivizing innovation in gender-smart remittances. So my question to all of the speakers, maybe starting with Julie, is among all of these, what would you say are the top challenges or things to watch out for to ensure that we achieve the potential of the approaches? And are there any particular barriers for RSPs or fintechs or investors that we should bear in mind? Julie, we'll start with you and then move to Natasha.
Okay, thanks, Saloma, for the question. And really, the first barrier that I see is for RSPs and fintechs, especially in ensuring gender-smart and migrant-centric approach, is really a poor collection or the lack of gender disaggregated data. And really, this is the first step. And ideally, this should be followed with a gender analysis in order to understand the existing biases, social norms, gender roles, and then we can engage in designing product offerings that reflect the realities of women remittance customers. And in most instances, we see that this is not so straightforward. I can give an example of one fintech we worked with, and they had a phenomenal idea to offer migrant-backed loans to recipients in Senegal. However, the uptake of the product turned out to be very low. And after conducting research with the fintech customers, we understood that there was a missing piece of the puzzle that they were not keeping into mind. And really, it was that relational dynamics between the migrant and the recipient. And I think once they were able to understand this part through research, basically having proper data, then they were able to improve the customer journey of these migrants. And the second barrier I would see is ideally it's important to understand that the remittance industry operates in a complex regulatory landscape, and navigating these requirements while also driving innovation can be very daunting for RSPs and emerging fintechs. Hence, as part of our work, besides building the capacity of the private sector partners, we at the team at UNCDF also builds the capacity of the policymakers and the regulators in the countries that we work with in order to enhance the development of enabling policies that encourage fintechs to operate. I think being mindful of those challenges and working collaboratively between the private sector and public sector and finding that middle ground I think we can be able to drive meaningful gender inclusive financial products. I hope that answers it.
Thank you, Julie. Again, I think that going back to the data, but saying that the RSPs of fintech should have systems in place from day one to be able to collect and analyze the data so that they can act on it. And then also bearing in mind the policy angle. Natasha, what would you say in your view then and I guess either between Natasha or Liana, what the key challenges you see are for either the fintechs and the RSPs or for the investors wishing to adopt this impact-linked finance approach?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to go first, and then I'll hand over to Liana. And actually, we see the exact same thing as Julie. The one of the biggest challenges we face is just the lack of data and the lack of data collection systems to really understand not only gender disaggregated data in terms of the numbers of women reached, but also understanding contextual differences and what that means for the impact that it is actually having on women. So I mean, women are not homogenous everywhere, and you know, there are definitely some similarities, but we want to be quite intentional about understanding that different financial products in different places, in different contexts, meet different needs. And so just counting the number of women is only the first step, but then actually for fintechs to have an understanding of what does that mean in terms of if a woman is served, where is she seeing the benefits? That is important from an impact perspective, but it is also important for their business model perspective, because the better they understand the value that they are creating for their customers, the better they can serve them and scale. So very similar to Julie's answer there.
Great, thank you. And Luyana, do you have anything to add then to that?
No, I mean, that was I can only emphasize, you know, what Julie and Natasha mentioned. I was recently, you know, through the Village Capital program, we recently had a gathering with some of the supported fintechs, and somebody mentioned that, you know, it's important to build with users and not just for users. And for that, data is key. And what we're seeing as well is that, you know, from the early stage fintechs that we're supporting to the more established, older and larger banks that we collaborate with, measuring impact data is still quite challenging. And that's why we've integrated support in impact measurement and management for the providers in our program. And I believe that way more support is needed there.
Great. I think, Luyana, you've already started touching on what was going to be my second and final question. You've talked about the fact that you're supporting a range of different fintechs, both from early to growth stage. And then Natasha also mentioning, you know, that women are not a monolith, and, you know, there's different, even within that customer base, there are different segments. So I think my question, and maybe we'll start with you, Luyana, is how are your funding and technical assistance models able to adapt to these nuances between the RSPs and the fintechs and the particular customer bases while still achieving the end goal, whether it's rewarding specific outcomes or, you know, remaining data-driven and customer-centric? So I think Luyana, will start with you, and then Natasha, and then Julie.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's a good question. And you know, as I was trying to illustrate with the Women's World Banking Incubation Program, we try to tailor approaches to address specific challenges faced by different providers as well as their customers. So while the end goal of, you know, empowering migrant women financially remains key and central, it's important to recognize that migrants and migrant women are not homogeneous or are not a monolith, like you mentioned. And each partnership with providers is adapted to fit their specific processes, structures, and client base. It's important, you know, understanding that the financial needs and behaviors of, you know, let's say a Nigerian woman migrating to the US or to Ghana may differ from those of a woman in Cambodia that's migrating to work in Thailand. So the solutions incubated through our programs, they can share common components which have been proven to work, but the replications, you know, are context specific. And I think it's important to collaborate and also to listen to those that are better placed to understand the environment they operate in.
Yeah, similarly from on the transaction side, every transaction that we do is we start from scratch to the point where the kind of menu that I showed of the metrics that we have is something that we had to develop because to show what kind of things we were working towards, because we were very, very adamant when we designed this fund that we didn't want to have 3 metrics that applied to every fintech in every geography in every circumstance, and try and incentivize based on that there is an acknowledgement that every organization is going to be facing individual challenges, and that we want to design around that. So kind of put that at the center and then design with that in mind. Similarly, with the technical assistance we provide, it is all bespoke. Of course, I will say that there are downsides to this approach, and the downsides are that it takes longer. And it takes longer from our side and from the fintech side. So it means that they have to be willing to spend some time with us, work through the model so that we understand it, so that we can end up at a design that really is bespoke. And that does take a lot longer, but we believe that when we get to it, it's something that in the long term is going to be more beneficial for them.
Thanks, Natasha. And Julie?
Yes, sure. I mean, my points as well would just resound those of Natasha and Luiana in terms of how we work. So we have had the opportunity to work with emerging fintechs and established FSPs, and we understand indeed that each company operates in a unique market context, and they're at different stages in terms of serving their customers. So what we do at UNCDF is we initiate a gender assessment in order to evaluate the RSP of fintech's understanding, their competencies and ambitions on gender equality, empowerment of women, their leadership structure, if they have a gender policy in place, and generally the type of data that they collect. And then after that, we place them on a scoring, which we call the gender continuum. And this generally helps us understand if the mechanisms of the RSP of fintech are perhaps gender blind, gender aware, accommodative, or transformative. And then out of that, we can start shaping our technical assistance and our funding. So yeah, this process is completely, it's not linear. Basically, we refine our interventions and our strategies based on the engagements that we have with the private sector partners. And hopefully this then allows them to improve their current situation in terms of serving the last mile customer. Yeah, hope that answers it.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie, Natasha, Luiana, for the presentations and for all the insights that you've shared. And so my task is to basically sum up everything that we've discussed today in the next 30 seconds. And I think for me, the key things that stood out, and hopefully these resonate with some of the things that the audience might be walking away with here today, are that innovation really does go beyond just the technology, and it's, you know, as we've seen, it's about the collaboration with all of the ecosystem participants to enable the inclusive processes that we'd like to see, whether it's the data gathering, testing, and sharing of insights, and replicating successes. And that really, to achieve the potential of gender smart remittances for the SDGs, it does require that whole ecosystem approach. And finally, that the RSPs and FSPs, the fintechs, do need comprehensive support for us to actually realize the market-based change that we'd like to see, whether supporting them to take up the insights from research, whether it's through providing financial incentives and technical assistance to be able to implement these digital solutions that work for women customers to improve their financial inclusion and financial health. And so I think with that brings us to the end of today's discussion. Thank you again to our audience for your active participation. If there are any questions that were pending in the chat, we'll be sure to note those and respond in a timely manner. And also, I think following this session, the recording will also be shared with everyone who joined the call today. And so with that, thank you again to our speakers. Thank you to the audience. Wishing everyone a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having us today.
Thank you.